The liturgy of the Word on Palm Sunday, with the reading of the Passion we just heard, is considerably longer than on any other Sunday of the year. This is a clear sign we are entering a special time, the holiest days of our lives as Catholics, when we are called to focus on that greatest of contradictions and the greatest act of love in human history, Jesus' passion and death. The account of Jesus' final 2 days is the longest continuous narrative to be found in the Gospels. This year, we heard Mark's version, which was the first written. Matthew and Luke's versions add other detail, but Mark gives us the essence of this story. There are many aspects that we just heard from which to gain spiritual insight. But let me focus on just 3 very briefly that stood out for me as I prepared for today's homily. The first was that anointing of Jesus, so closely tied in the story to his betrayal by Judas. Now, Mark gives few particulars of the anointing other than it took place in Bethany, the home of Lazarus, whom Jesus had raised from the dead, and that it was close to Passover. The event takes on great significance at this juncture in Jesus' life. His death is imminent, already foreshadowed in the plotting of the chief priests and the scribes. This is a burial anointing, and it is on Jesus' head, such as would be done with a king, in contrast to the feet anointing that we see in the Gospel of Luke. This says to us that Jesus is coming into his reign via his death and burial. Faced with the accusation of wasteful spending, Jesus gives us that well-known line, sometimes taken out of context, that the poor will always be with us, but importantly, for us to care for. But what this woman has done will be told always in her memory, and so indeed it is. Following immediately after the anointing, we hear that Judas, one of the 12, plots with the chief priest to hand him over. Judas, though having been with Jesus now for close to 3 years, can you imagine, is captured somehow by the ways of the world and believes it will be somehow better for Jesus to die. The contrast with a woman who at great monetary cost in putting her own life at risk to anoint Jesus is stark. In our time, we certainly have those that will do anything for Jesus, whatever the cost. But we also have those who will seem to do anything to prevent the reign of Jesus from continuing. We will always have these 2 types of people. The second important aspect of the gospel I will mention is the institution of the Eucharist. Is there anything more important in our lives as Catholics? The body to be eaten and blood to be drunk anticipate the death of Jesus on the following day, which inaugurates a new covenant. As Catholics, to grow in our spiritual lives is to grow in our appreciation and love of the Eucharist. Jesus has left us the gift of his very self, not symbolically or simply as a prayer, but his physical self, body, blood, soul, and divinity, in the transubstantiated bread and wine consecrated at each and every Mass. We can and should partake of this gift as often as we can, both within the holy sacrifice of the Mass as well as by spending time in the presence of Jesus through adoration of the Eucharist in the tabernacle and through exposition. The Eucharist unifies us as Catholics in a way like none other. As the group makes its way then to the garden on the Mount of Olives, Jesus sees his arrest and execution as the occasion when his apostles will be dispersed. But he immediately reminds them that he will be raised up and they will reassemble in Galilee. Despite Peter's vehement protest, Jesus predicts his denial. This stark and even embarrassing truth about central figures in the gospel, including Peter, Jesus' closest friend and apostle, gives this entire picture we heard today credibility. These stories were not created for some other purpose. They actually occurred. The third area I would like to mention for reflection is the death and burial of Jesus. As stark as Mark's presentation is, the death of Jesus is vividly painful. All the details leading to the moment give a sense of fulfillment. The inscription on the cross, the quote from Psalm 22, which we heard in our responsorial psalm today, on the lips of Jesus, in the darkness that falls on the earth. The tearing of the temple veil tells us of the end of a former era, in the beginning of a new covenant, in a way of worshiping God. The words of the centurion are particularly climactic in Mark's gospel. The central theme in this first of the gospels to be recorded is Jesus as Christ and Son of God. At the midpoint of this gospel, Peter acknowledges Jesus as Christ, the Messiah, and here at the gospel's end, the centurion sees him as Son of God. The fact the centurion, as a Gentile, proclaims this means the mission of the church is going to be to the entire world. The reading of the Passion twice during Holy Week, here on Palm Sunday and again on Good Friday from John's Gospel, brings us face to face with the stark reality of what Jesus endured. Mark's version provides little embellishment, just the facts. But in these facts, Mark is answering the question of who this man Jesus was. He was the Christ, the Son of God, who became obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. For this he was greatly exalted. In the midst of darkness on the hill of Calvary, great light appears. May we all enter into this Holy Week knowing of God's great love for each and every one of us. I hope you are able to join us in person or on live stream for the Triduum celebrations, which begin on Holy Thursday at 7 p.m.